What if the Betty and Barney Hill alien abduction was real? The night. On the night of September 19th, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill drove south through the White Mountains of New Hampshire on US Route 3. They were heading home to Portsmouth after 10 days in Montreal. It was just after midnight. The road was empty. The moon was out. A single light appeared in the sky behind their car. The light was bright. The light was moving. Barney slowed the car and pulled into a side road. He got out and walked back toward the light. He raised a pair of binoculars Betty had lent him. What he saw, in his own words years later, was a craft shaped like a pancake, with windows along the side and humanoid figures standing in a row. He ran back to the car. He drove. Betty's watch, which she had not looked at, had stopped. They reached home around 5 a.m. 2 hours of their lives were unaccounted for. Barney had a dry, scaly patch on his groin. Betty's dress was torn at the hem. The car's hood was cool. The car had been parked. Who they were. Betty Hill was 39 years old. She was a social worker for the state of New Hampshire. She was a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania. She had grown up in the South. She was white. She held a master's degree in sociology. In 1961, she worked for the New Hampshire Department of Welfare, where she was one of the first African American supervisors in the department's history. She had been adopted. Her family history traced through the Wood family of New Hampshire, one of the oldest black families in the state. Barney Hill was 39 as well. By day, he was a postal worker. By night and on weekends, he was a Civil War reenactor. He had served in the Army during the Korean War. He had been active in the local NAACP. He was black. The Hills had been married for 7 years. They had no children. Both had been raised in New Hampshire. They were active in the local Unitarian church, well known in their community and respected by everyone who knew them. The night of September 19th, 1961, was the night of a national civil rights conference in Portsmouth. Barney had just been elected to his third term as a local NAACP officer. Betty had just finished a case review at work. They had taken 10 days off, had driven to Montreal, and had visited Betty's sister, who lived in the city. They were on their way home. It was a normal night, until it was not. The encounter. In the weeks after the drive, Betty began to have vivid nightmares. A road appeared in the dreams. A craft landed. Figures emerged. Betty and Barney were taken. Inside, a table waited. An eye-shaped device moved over her body. A needle slid into her navel. The men spoke a language she did not understand. Then they left, and the Hills were back in their car. The dreams came back, night after night. Each one was more detailed than the last. By November of 1961, Betty had begun to write the dreams down. She kept a notebook by the bed. She filled 12 pages in a single night. Barney's response was different. No recurring nightmares came to him. Instead, anxiety attacks arrived. A persistent ringing filled his ears. Weight fell off. Sleep would not come. He could not, by his own account, remember any of what had happened. The mind had blocked it out. He had, he later said, the strongest feeling he had ever had in his life, that something had happened that he did not want to remember. The dreams did not let the Hills rest. The dreams were, in Betty's own words, where the answer was, Dr. Benjamin Simon. In November of 1963, the Hills contacted a UFO investigation group called NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. NICAP referred them to a Boston psychiatrist named Dr. Benjamin Simon. Simon was a respected figure in the Boston medical community. He specialized in treating combat veterans. Past president of the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, he agreed to take the case. He told the Hills he would use hypnotic regression to recover whatever memories they had blocked. Sessions began in December of 1963. Simon taped every session. He kept detailed notes. He treated the Hills for nearly 2 years. Under hypnosis, Barney gave his account in fragments. Figures appeared. A craft materialized. A leader of the figures spoke, telling him he would not remember. The leader pointed a small device at him. A sound came from the device. Then, nothing. Betty, under hypnosis, gave a different account. The inside of the craft came back to her. So did the figures, the table, the eye-shaped device, the needle. A long conversation with the leader returned, in which the leader told her where the figures came from. So did the leader, showing her a map. Simon's conclusion, published in a paper he gave at a medical conference in 1969, was that the Hills had experienced something real, but that the something was not an alien abduction. Simon concluded that the Hills had probably encountered a U.S. military aircraft, possibly a secret reconnaissance craft, and that the Hills had reconstructed the encounter in their own minds, using imagery from a television broadcast of the time. The TV show, in Simon's view, was The Outer Limits, which had premiered the week before the encounter. The Star Map. In February of 1969, Betty Hill gave a presentation about her case at a NICAP meeting. A question came from the audience. The question was about the star map she said she had been shown on the craft. Betty had never been able to draw the map from memory. Under hypnosis, she had been able to describe the map. The description had been taped. The description was detailed. The description was consistent across multiple sessions. The questioner was a high school teacher in Ohio named Marjorie Fish. Fish was a member of the MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and a serious amateur astronomer. She spent the next year building a three-dimensional model of the nearest stars to the Sun, using a star catalog from the Harvard-Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. The catalog was the most complete available. The model used color-coded beads. The beads were suspended on clear nylon threads. The threads were mounted in a wooden frame. The whole thing took up the better part of her living room. When Fish plotted Betty's description onto her model, a match emerged. The map matched a binary star system called Zeta Reticuli. Zeta Reticuli is a real system. It is 39 light-years from Earth. It consists of two stars, called Zeta 1 and Zeta 2, both smaller and cooler than the Sunday. Both stars are visible from the southern hemisphere. The system was not on the standard star maps of the 1960s. It was not in any astronomy textbook Betty Hill could have read. The system was not, in any direct sense, famous. The match was not exact. Several of the stars on Betty's map did not have a direct counterpart in the Fish model. But the overall structure of the map, the relative positions of the major stars, the existence of a binary system in the lower right of the map, all matched. The match was too good to be random, in Fish's view. The match was, also, not so good that it proved the case. John Fuller and the book. In 1966, a journalist named John G. Fuller published a book about the Hills. The Interrupted Journey was its title. Fuller had been a freelance writer for Look magazine and for the Saturday Review. He had covered the Betty and Barney Hill case for several years. Interviews with the Hills had been a long process. So had interviews with Simon, a review of the tapes, a review of the dream notebooks, and access to the polygraph results from a session in which Barney had been tested by a former CIA polygraph examiner named John Spaulding. Publication came in March of 1966. The book became a national bestseller. Reviews ran in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in Life magazine. The book was, in many ways, the moment the alien abduction story entered the American mainstream. Before Fuller, alien abduction was a fringe topic. After Fuller, alien abduction was on the front page of the Saturday Evening Post. Fuller closed the book with the star map, but with the map presented as a puzzle, not a proof. He also closed it with Betty's account of what the leader had said to her on the craft about where the figures came from. Barney's account of the leader's parting words was there too. The book closed on a question, not an answer. The question, in Fuller's framing, was whether the Hills had been telling the truth about what they had seen, or whether the Hills had reconstructed an ordinary encounter in an extraordinary way. Sales cleared 1 million copies in hardcover. The book was the reason the Hills became, for better or worse, the most famous alien abduction case in American history. Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the United States Air Force's official UFO investigation program. It ran from 1952 to 1969, operational successor to Project Sign and Project Grudge. At its peak, it had more than a dozen officers, more than 20 staff members, and a budget of more than $700,000 a year. The Hills case was investigated by the Air Force for nearly a decade. Major Paul Hill, an aeronautical engineer and UFO investigator at Project Blue Book, wrote his own internal analysis. His conclusion: the Hills encounter was consistent with a physical craft of extraterrestrial origin. The Air Force never published Hill's analysis. Hill published it himself in a private printing in 1975. The official Air Force conclusion, published in a report by Captain Gregory Timon and the Project Blue Book staff in 1965, was that the Hills had experienced a misidentification of natural phenomena. No formal interview was held. No access was granted to the Simon tapes. No access was granted to the star map analysis. The conclusion was, in the words of one later researcher, the conclusion the Air Force had already decided to reach before the investigation began. The Hills were not told the report was coming. A reporter's phone call to the House in the fall of 1965 was how they learned. The report became the official U.S. government position on the case. The position has not been updated since. The question: here is what the record contains. 2 New Hampshire residents, Betty and Barney Hill, who reported within hours of a drive south on U.S. Route 3 in September of 1961 that they had been taken aboard a craft. A Boston psychiatrist, Dr. Benjamin Simon, who spent 2 years in hypnotic regression with the Hills and concluded they had experienced something real. A schoolteacher in Ohio, Marjorie Fish, who built a 3-dimensional model of nearby stars and found that Betty's star map matched a real system, Zeta Reticuli, in a way that was too good to be random. A journalist, John Fuller, whose book The Interrupted Journey was a national bestseller and put the case in the public conversation. An Air Force investigator, Major Paul Hill, who concluded the encounter was consistent with a craft of extraterrestrial origin. 65 years of consistent witness testimony. One book by Betty in 1976, A Common Sense Approach to UFOs. One book by a researcher in 2007, The Betty Hill Story. Here is what the record does not contain: a photograph of the craft, a piece of the craft, a body, a specimen, a second encounter with the same figures in the 6 decades since. A definitive answer from any government about what the Hills saw. If you got to the end, you are exactly the kind of person this channel is made for. Subscribe now and watch to the end for your daily dose of What If It's Real. What if the Betty and Barney Hill alien abduction was real? What if the bright light in the White Mountains on the night of September 19th, 1961 was not a misidentified natural phenomenon, not a military reconnaissance craft, not a shared dream, but a record of something that actually happened to 2 people on a quiet road in northern New England 65 years ago? And what if the question is not whether the abduction was real, but why the figures chose a mixed-race couple from New Hampshire on a road trip home from Montreal on a Tuesday night in September to be the first Americans anyone outside of science fiction would ever believe had seen them? What if the case at the foundation of the alien abduction genre is, in fact, the most solid case in the genre? The record is what it is. The craft, by Simon's own conclusion, was real. The star map, by Fish's analysis, was not random. The dream notebooks, by every witness, are the dream notebooks. The Hills were, by every account, sane. The encounter was, by every account, 2 hours long. The figures were, by Barney's account, in a row at the window. The question sits in the same place it has sat for 65 years. The White Mountains have not changed. The road has not changed. The light, on the night of September 19th, 1961, was there.